Greetings. Thank you all for coming. This has been wonderful to be invited. We're passionate about biochar. How many people know what biochar is? Can I just get a sense? Okay, so I'm going to give a slight overview on the basics of biochar, talk a little bit about how we got into it and why we're so passionate about it, and also talk about the potential for smallholder farmers to be able to make biochar, use it in their fields, and be able to get additional income from carbon credits for carbon removal. This is an emerging market. It's still very small. So I will talk about this, but know that this is something that's going to take a while before we can really get it to take off. Okay, so today we're going to talk about what biochar is, both as a soil amendment and for carbon removal. Talk a bit about Warm Heart and Biochar Life, which is the public benefit corporation that we created to manage the carbon credits, why we're in this, some of the benefits for biochar, and how everybody can make this and go forward and teach people to do this. Okay, so biochar is basically made by taking any biomass, heating it without oxygen in a process that's called pyrolysis. And what that does is it burns away all the non-carbon materials, and you get what looks like just, pure carbon. And when you get that, you end up with something that you can take and put in the soil with some organic matter like compost or manure, and keep it in the soil. So what it does is it actually improves the soil over time. So farmers may add some every year. There's a certain amount that you want to have accumulate in the soil, but it holds it in. It's a way to be organic without having to use chemical fertilizers, but whatever you have in there, it's going to hold it. So chemical fertilizers often just wash out. So they're washing out into our water systems, whereas this will hold all that in the soil. Another thing that it does is it retains water. So as we become have more droughts with the climate change, it's a way to reduce the amount of water that's needed. And we've also we simplified the technology to make it a very low cost way for farmers to be able to improve their livelihoods. And as I think a lot of you know, the cost of synthetic fertilizers have gone up greatly over the last months as the war in Ukraine has increased oil prices, et cetera. So this has become even more important. I don't know if you saw a recent article in the Times it was about Nigeria, but it's really about how farmers are really getting stuck because of the cost of fertilizers. So how does biochar help us remove CO2 from the air? So we make biochar according to an artisan standard. There are three main bodies that certify biochar: Vera, Gold Standard, and the EBC, which is the European Biochar Certificate, which has now been taken over by Carbon Standards International. And so using the process that we've developed with them, we were able to create an artisan standard, and that biochar can be tested and shown that it has a certain amount of carbon in it. And then that will be used to that actually takes carbon out of the air. And when it is used in the farmer's fields, it's sequestered. So it's considered carbon removal, which is different than the carbon emissions, which is the CERs, which we've heard about for many years, where companies will trade their pollution credits with another company that's making less. But in that process, all you're doing is evening out the amount of emissions into the atmosphere. Whereas with biochar, you're actually capturing that CO2 and putting it into the ground. So for smallholder farmers, biochar brings a lot of benefits. So for each ton of biochar that's made, you can take 2 tons of CO2 out of the air, which adds up quite quickly. Biochar in the soil will lock in the nutrients, but it's been used widely to take heavy metals and pesticides out of the soil. So, for example, in China, where the government has endorsed biochar, there are major operations doing it at a very large scale to try and clean the soil. They also use it in um, water filtration and other means, but it's a great way to take some of these chemicals and the residues out of the food chain. It, there are billions of smallholder farmers, and this gives them a way to improve their livelihoods. So initially, they'll improve their own yields and food security, but over time, they're going to have more crops that they can sell in the markets. And this also disproportionately, we found in terms of the people that we're training, is this was great impact for women to improve their livelihoods, help them to take care of their families. The other critical thing, which is where we got started in Thailand, is that what we're trying to do is have farmers not burn the biomass waste that they have, but to make it using this pyrolysis process so that there is no smoke, and you'll see that in a minute. The PM 2.5 that comes from the smoke that you breathe is one of the top killers according to the World Health Organization. It kills about 4 million people a year. And if you've been through the smoke here, you know we sleep with our masks on. So just quickly, Warm Heart is a U.S. nonprofit that we established in 2008. The mission is to do community-based development. We came in and we had a partner in northern Thailand, which is how we've gotten based in Prao, which is about an hour and a half north of here, looking at how to help smallholder rural farmers improve their livelihoods. And we spent a year talking to people, figuring out what their priorities were. And basically what we've ended up doing is helping provide access to education, jobs, and we've also helped the elderly in our community. We've created a visiting program that creates a safety net for the elderly. So we learned about biochar here at ECHO, and we were interested in it because we have a small farm where we have our children's home, and the soil is not soil, it's dirt. There was almost no organic matter. And so over the years, we've been here 15 years now, we've been doing biochar for 10, we've started to be able to grow on those lands. And we also saw that we could try, if you look at the smoke that happens in Chiang Mai, and this is a problem around the world. So you've read about the Delhi school system shutting down, the government shuts down when the wheat harvest gets burned. So, and it happens all the way around the world as the harvests get harvested, and then they're getting ready for the next crops. And as much as there is, traditional wisdom around burning to be able to kill off the bugs and whatever's there, in fact, that burning doesn't go down far enough to really do that effectively. So it's much better to take the crop waste and make biochar out of it. So if you look at the Chiang Mai area, the smoke and the fires come from both forest fires, but a lot of it is from people doing this kind of burning of their biomass. And some of those small fires then create the forest fires. So this Stop the Smoke program was something that I'll talk about in a minute. But as we were able to develop this Stop the Smoke program, we started to see that there was this potential for the carbon markets. And so we created Biochar Life, which is it's a public benefit company. So it's a regular company, but it manages our carbon credit program. So how did we get into this? So this is where the political science half of the partnership comes in. But there are over 5 million smallholder farmers that produce 80% of the world's food, much of it for the developed world. They produce gigatons of waste annually. And we could burn at least, we would pyrolyze at least half of that and make it into biochar, which would then reduce the haze and cool our climate. Okay, so as we said we'd started with the Stop the Smoke program. Just to give you some sense of what you're smoking, let me tell you, I've stopped harassing my friends who smoke cigarettes because I know that I'm inhaling the equivalent of many cigarettes. So this was something Michael came up with to try and make this real to people, that if you burn 1 ton of biomass, you're creating 6 kilograms of smoke, which is the equivalent of 440,000 cigarettes. So you really don't want to be inhaling that smoke. And this is where I said, I mean, respiratory diseases kills more people than all the other top diseases like malaria, HIV, et cetera. And it disproportionately hurts the elderly and children. So this is where we got into stopping the haze. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of how we got here. I mean, we are a small NGO. Michael and I started it ourselves. We bootstrapped it. We, raised the money. We don't have any organization behind us. Once we were able to articulate the benefits of biochar, we got a couple of small grants from both the US and the Canadian governments. And in Thailand, we went over to Meidjem. I don't know if anybody's been there, but it's different than what we have up in Prau, which are these very small farms. Whereas in Meidjem, the corn farmers get together as a community, and so it looks more like the American Midwest. But when you burn all that crop waste, you've got a huge amount of smoke coming into Chiang Mai. And so we went there and we wanted to prove that farmers, if they saw the economic benefit, would be willing to make biochar. So in that project, we actually offered to pay, and people embraced it. We ended up with tons and tons of biochar. And then we had to figure out what to do with it because they couldn't use all of it themselves. And when we went to try and sell it, we realized that we needed a certification. And this is, I'd mentioned these international certification bodies. And this is where we were able to convince the EBC to include smallholder farmers, because we were able to take the output of our biochar, show them that we had quality biochar, just like the big commercial operations. You didn't have to have the perfect biochar. You could have roughly right biochar and still have this great benefit to millions of people. And so EBC was willing to work with us and establish this artisan farmers standard, which is still full of lots of scientific stuff, but you can boil it down and teach it to smallholder farmers. So we created the process of how to manage that. So we have to be able to verify that the farmers are actually making the biochar according to this artisan process. And that needs to be logged. We have to get photographs of that. And before we can create a carbon sink credit, all that has to be logged. So we've got verifiers out in the field. We have a handheld phone app to collect that information. So there was quite a bit of effort into trying to set these processes. Biochar is wonderful stuff, but when it holds water, but when you're trying to weigh it and it's still absorbing water, you end up with days figuring out how you're going to weigh biochar that's got water in it. But we figured all those things out. But and then what we've done is we've leveraged the fact that we have a large network of farmers that we've taught to make biochar. So even before, I'll go back into the carbon credits in a minute, but we've trained almost more than 17,000 farmers in Thailand and Africa. And I'll just give you a quick story because it's such a wonderful one. How did we get into Africa from Prao in Thailand? Through email. So Sister Miriam Paulette is a Carmelite nun in Zamba, Malawi. And we get these emails all the time asking us for help. And we said, well, we don't have any money. But if you want to learn about biochar, we have a website which has a lot of videos, and you can learn and you can try it. And Michael saw this and he said, oh, I know where Zamba is. It's where they have a prison where they've got a wonderful music group that was actually up for an Emmy Award, Grammy Award. So we got to going back and forth with Sister. And she used our videos and she created an initial kiln, and they made biochar to use on the monastery grounds. And it was terrific. And then they learned, and the other thing that you can do with biochar is you can feed it to your animals. So if you put it in the feed, it helps their digestive system. And if you put it around, in their pens or their chicken coops, you get rid of the smell, and then you just collect that and use it for fertilizer. So she thought this was great, and she set up these networks in both Malawi and Kenya because she had originally been from Kenya. And the initial networks in Kenya were all her family or people because I took 3 years of working with her online. We sent them small amounts of money and they went out and got farmers trained. And when I finally met her, she said, well, we really weren't sure whether this was going to work. So we only were willing to tell our family to try it. But now we've expanded our network beyond that. So it's become something it's a really wonderful project. And it was wonderful for us to be able to go and see the farmers and see that they're, reaping the benefits of the biochar. So we continue on the Warm Heart side to try and train farmers and get them to know the benefits of biochar, but not necessarily be able to promise them that they can become part of the carbon markets. But eventually we hope that the market will expand and be able to do that. So we've able to partner up with a couple of really entrepreneurial people that helped us create this public benefit corporation, Biochar Life. And we've been in business since March of 2022, which is just a little over a year. And we are learning our way. So we have, let me just see what else we've got in here. We've both created our own handheld app to collect the data and worked with other organizations. I don't know if anybody knows Task.io. They were located up in Pi, actually, and that was our initial application. And we've gone through a few different versions of it, and we're now partnered with Plant Village, which is it's part of Penn State University, and it's considered open source app, and we've been working with them. It's something you might want to look at, Plant Village, online, because they've got this app separate from the biochar side, which gives farmers information about diseases. Farmers can take pictures of, leaves that have gotten chewed by worms and get feedback on that. So it's a broad source for farmers of a lot of information. So we've got these networks of, a lot of the trainers that we had have become the verifiers. They know how to make biochar, they know what they're looking for, and they now will go out and verify that the farmers are making it correctly and they make sure that it's getting used correctly. So if you take that biochar and you burn it for charcoal or something, it is not going to count towards a carbon credit. But if you're mixing it with manure or compost and you're using in the fields, then it's going to be eligible for the carbon credits. So this is just part of this journey that we were on. These are the kilns that we've been working with, and you'll see a range of those this afternoon if you're going to be coming to the farm to look at different low-cost kilns. So actually, Gordon was here a minute ago. Gordon worked with us on these designs, and we initially tried figuring out, taking a big one, creating a large one that we thought would work for rice farms. And the farmers just looked at it and said, forget it. It's way too big. We can never use that. Where we work up in Proud, there's a lot of orchards. And so when they get pruned, we have farmers who have worked out with those orchard owners that they'll leave the prunings, let them dry, and then we'll make biochar out of them. So all that we're doing is we're trying to encourage people not to cut down trees, not to cut down, resources that they're using for other things, but to be using the waste. But if you're going to be making biochar out of branches, you want to use something like this trough that's on the left. And that trough is designed to be able to fit in the back of a pickup truck. So the farmers up where we are have got, they have multiples out there. They have teams that go out and make the biochar. And then they, in that case, they're arranging with other farmers who are trying to go organic, and they use the biochar. This T-Lud, which is let's see if I can get this to work. So this is a T-Lud top lit up draft. And that's made out of a used oil drum. So in and of itself, it's not very expensive to make. It's an oil drum plus a piece of roofing sheet. But if you're in Africa and you're a smallholder farmer, that's way too expensive. And so that's how we ended up looking at this trench. And so it's basically a rectangular trench. You make it the size a little bit sloped. We've got specs on but basically you can make biochar in there. It takes a little bit of, finesse. You've got to layer in the crop waste. And as you can see, you get this flame. We call it the flame cap, and that burns without the oxygen, and then the biochar just falls to the bottom. And then what you do is you stop the burning before you end up with ash. And you can use water to do that. If you don't have water, you can smother it. And that's what the roofing sheet is being used for in this trench. And if you don't have to measure it for carbon credits, you can just dump soil in there and then use it and mix it up into your soil. But these are some of the things that we did over time to try and make it more accessible to the smallholder farmers. How are we on time? Okay. So, we've talked about biochar in terms of how the major impact on slowing climate change. If we can get these many millions of farmers making it, we will definitely be able to make a major impact. The fertilizer reduces greenhouse gases. If you mix it with compost, it will hold in the methane, so you're not creating methane, which is a problem with compost. And as we're able to create this market for carbon credits, we'll be able to improve the incomes of these farmers. So this is clearly something where we can all help people help themselves. It doesn't require a huge investment. It doesn't require people, external intervention, and it's something we can do easily. I've provided, I want to thank you, but I've provided resources here, and there are many more links based on these sites. But the Warm Heart site has got videos and documents in multiple languages. If anybody wants to translate some of these documents into their own language, let us know and we'll post it. It's also a link to the Biochar Life site so you can see what we've accomplished there. And if you're particularly interested in this, in the carbon removal, you'll be able to look at the carbon standard site. So thank you very much for your time. And Michael and I will be here for the rest of the conference. So we'd be happy to talk to anybody that's interested.